Doesn't matter who's talking. We got it. All right. So now I can erase this recorder thing here. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and kick things off. We're about 5 after, and I want to make sure we have enough time for all the content we're going to be talking about today, as well as questions through this. So this is the plan for today. I'll do a little quick intro on myself, and then we'll talk about the foundational things today. We're going to talk about what is sales. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page around the sales process, some of the things that we want to talk about in sales, as far as how it feels, what it looks like, the people involved. We will talk about why process is so important, and we'll go through buyer's process versus sales process and how the two work together. And then we'll move into defining targets, talking about ideal customer profile, how to build that really well, moving down into persona and what's so important about that. We will dive a little bit into messaging, which is not up on the board, but that has a big part to do with personas and understanding your targets better. Okay, so this will be the foundation of it. This is the first session in a series of 6 that all work together. This is a progression where we're starting at the foundational level, and the hope is, as we get through this entire thing, all 6 sessions give you the ability to put all those pieces of the puzzle together to build what we would consider your sales playbook, the foundational knowledge you need to then start growing your sales organization. Okay. It will be all very, very focused on the EdTech space and what makes it unique. I actually call it more like the B2E space instead of B2B. Okay. So I'll start a little bit with my background. I have a little over 30 years of sales experience. Okay. I've sold everything from vacuum cleaners to perfume to telecommunication, all that stuff. But the last 13 years, I have only been really in the EdTech space, specifically in K12. Okay. 6 years ago, I started consulting and helping small businesses figure out how to drive a more scalable sales process for themselves. So I was training salespeople, building sales organizations. I've worked with over 50 different EdTech companies over the years now, helping them to grow. And so this is an accumulation of all that knowledge that I've been gaining through working with them. There's very specific key issues that people have during the growth stage. And a lot of the companies that I work with are very early startups that just got their first customer, all the way through the hyper growth mode where they're really starting to take off. Okay. So I have this experience of how people have grown through that process to get to that level. And that's what I'm trying to do to bring to the table here, is to help folks understand some of the challenges that are happening there. Okay. And when it comes to sales in general, that is a big area where people are missing out on the knowledge. A lot of EdTech founders, matter of fact, a lot of early stage founders come to the table with a lot of product knowledge, right? They said, I see a problem and I'm going to build something to solve that problem. But then when it comes to going to market and selling that product, there's not a ton of experience in that area. And so what we're hoping to do is to help you from avoiding some of those mistakes when you hire salespeople, when you grow your sales organization, when you talk about hiring a leader, things of that nature. Okay? Any questions before we really get started on session number 1? Okay, all good. All right. Feel free to unmute, yell, talk through the whole thing, raise your hand. It'll throw you up into the top if you use the reactions on the bottom, things like that. Okay. Again, I want everybody to get the most they possibly can out of this. All right. So if you're not asking questions, pardon me. Okay. All right. Let's talk through this first. All right. First thing on the list here is we're going to talk about what is sales. I like to start right there because I want to make sure everybody really understands what it means to be in sales and the challenges that are faced there. So if I say the word salesperson, what are the first few words that start popping into your head to describe salesperson as that person who interrupts your day right now? Any thoughts in that category? What are some? Pardon me?
A shark. I think of sales
Shark.
sharks.
Shark. That's a good one. That's a good one. A shark. What else?
Unsolicited email,
Yeah.
contact.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things I hear a lot in the line with that is that they're pushy, right? They're pushing things down my throat. They're trying to push something on me that I don't really want, right? Part of the things I hear too are like manipulative. They're greedy. They only care about themselves. Because they get paid commission, they're trying to figure out how they can push something on me that'll make them more money, and it's not worth mine. It's not good for me, right? So when you start building your sales organization, when you start going to market more than just talking to friends and networks and referrals and things of that nature, when you take that next leap out into talking to people in a cold manner, like they don't know about you, that's how they think about you, right? When you're trying to sell your product, they're going to be saying, oh my gosh, this person is going to, this is someone who's a liar, who's trying to push something on me, manipulate me, right? That's what your salespeople are going to be dealing with too. They have to figure out how to overcome that feeling right off the bat. It's the #1 biggest problem that we deal with, right? Okay, so we've got to understand what it looks like first so that we can start figuring out how we move in a better direction and help folks, okay? This type of feeling is very prevalent out there, and it comes a lot more from a sales process that is pushy, okay? So there's a lot of different sales processes out there, and we're very much going to be talking about what it looks like to be in the B2B space, okay? There is a B2C side that can feel a lot more pushy, okay? And that's where a lot of people feel this way about it. And there's 2 reasons why people buy. They buy because they are either in pain or because they need a gain, because they're looking for a gain, right? That can look like a need versus a want. Okay? Which one do you think is easier to sell to, pain or gain?
Pain.
Pain.
Yeah. Pain. People want to get out of pain before they want to see a gain, right? This is what we're going to be teaching about. We're going to be teaching about a pain-based sale or a need-based sale, okay? And when you look at that, that is more of the B2B version of sales. When you look at, and this is in general, it's not always, but a B2C feels more like a gain, right? There's this thing that you want that you could need, but all the other pieces that go with it are more of like nice to have, cool wants. And so that salesperson is trying to push more on you. Like, hey, I want this car. I just need something to get me from here to there. Oh, but there's so many things that can go with that car that could make it so much better. And you want my car more than you want the other car. And they're trying to push, right? In a pain-based sale, someone is struggling. They're frustrated. They've got a problem, right? And the job of the sales rep is to uncover that need and solve a problem. Okay, that's a totally different feel than trying to push something on somebody, okay? And so what we're going to be teaching is about how to be a problem solver, okay? We as sales reps in the B2E space especially are going to be, oh, wait a second, problem solver. I got a little ahead of myself. All right, so problem solver is what we really want to be, right? Okay, so if we are to try to create that environment of solving a problem, what kind of skills do we have to have in our salesperson? What do we have and what kind of skills do we have to present out there as a problem solver?
Listening skills.
Listening is a great one. I'll add a word to the front of that. Active listener. Active listening, right?
Yep.
My wife reminds me all the time that there is a big difference between listening and active listening. You know, you heard me, you just weren't listening to me, right? Active listening is focusing on the person without any other distractions happening, right? We're listening to understand, because we can't solve a problem if we don't understand what the problem is. So we have to spend some time really actively focused to understand that other person and really engage with them. And what comes from that as well, and this is a big one for K-12 in the EdTech space, it's empathy. We really have to have empathy. So we have to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person. We will be talking about that here. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person and really understand that person, really get to know and be able to relate to the challenges. And you guys, if everyone in the room is founders or lead folks on the team, that you guys, most of you are coming from this environment where you have spent time in that space. You really understand the problem. You experienced it firsthand, right? And so now you have created something to solve that problem, but now you got to hand that off to somebody else and say, go sell this for me, right? It's almost like saying you're trying to have a babysitter feel as passionate and excited about your child as you as the parent are, right? And it's never going to happen that way. However, you have to be able to teach that salesperson how to feel what the other person is feeling and the experience that they're having around the why you built what you built, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yep.
The people on the other end of this that you're selling to, there's a very mission focused mindset out there, right? It's not about ROI. It's not about how much money it costs and what it's going to do for the organization. It's more about what is it going to do for the kids? What is it going to do for the teachers? What is the student? I care about student achievement and outcome and things of that nature. And so we really have to understand that piece of it and empathize and get to connect with really the problem. Okay. The other side of this too is that when it comes to being a salesperson, it is a hard job. You get rejected all day long. If you're doing cold outreach, the average, like just to give you a few numbers, you could make 50 calls, talk to 5 people, and one person is going to say yes. One person is going to say, maybe I'm interested. If you get 4 people to say, maybe I'm interested, one of those persons is going to buy from you. That's a lot of energy and effort to put into this, and a lot of rejection, a lot of failure. It's almost like the batting average of a Major League Baseball player who goes up to bat and says, man, you're doing amazing if you fail most of the time, right? You know, your 300 batting average means you're failing 70% of the time. And that's very similar to what happens in sales. Your sales rep or you as the initial person selling your product, you may be seeing some great, like, man, if I put this product in front of somebody, they're buying it from me. That's what happens with referrals and network connections and early stage people who just get it when you talk to them. But when you start moving into more of like this growth stage and you're ready to sell this thing to cold folks that don't know anything about you, that close rate starts to decline. And it's like, what's happening? Well, that's normal. That's normal. We've got to get in front of more people because of the fact our close rate's going to be lower, but our sales rep has to have a level of real grit, okay? They have to be able to get through the tough times. They have to be able to see the positive and the negative, okay? They're going to be, they have to realize that this is a numbers game. They're going to be running into a lot of people saying no. And we got to be able to be okay with that and move on and not be desperate and keep trying to push someone who's not ready. Okay? Is that all making sense? All right. So let's talk about process real quick. This is a bigger conversation around process because in sales, it is very, very process driven. Sales and marketing, that side of the house, your go-to-market approach has to be, yes, Matt.
Yeah. Hey, Daniel. Is there anything specific to ed tech that like a generic salesperson? I mean, these are general skills that a salesperson needs, right? But expertise, knowledge, subject matter expert, like how much have you seen that it really that matters in this process?
Well, when it comes to like, so I care early stage with somebody that they know the industry more than they know the product. I want them to understand the people that they're going to be engaging with, the state of the union, what's happening in the world right now with education and because they need to have a really genuinely good conversation with the other person. And so that's what I care about, like addressing early stage with the person. So if I can find somebody that has a background in that, and then I can teach them a little bit more of the sales methodology and process, that to me is more exciting, right? They just have to
Sorry, is that your starting point? Meaning like that's the core requirement?
Yeah, I'll jump ahead to another session where we're going to be talking about kind of like what the organization looks like in sales and what the ideal situation would be. Early stage as founders starting to move into saying, I'm going to create my sales org. It is difficult to just jump in and say, I'm going to hire a sales leader right away and let them take over and run. Because the challenge is you as a founder don't have the foundational knowledge of understanding what is the sales leader supposed to do and how do I hold that person accountable. And so what typically happens is they hire a sales leader, that person comes to the table with a bunch of ideas, but not a lot of action, that not a lot of executing because they feel like, you know what, I'm above that. I've done that for a long time. I don't need to prospect. And so that fails. And we go, okay, now we need to hire a sales rep. We hire a sales rep and that person executes like crazy with no real guidance because you don't have the foundation in place. And so what I would recommend is as you grow your sales org, you start very early with a role that is considered like a prospector. Okay, so it's your SDR, sales development rep. And you as the leader who has been selling right now, you stop prospecting and work on closing and this person prospects. That person can then grow into an AE and it's just, you start early, start small, and you grow that person up to the next level, backfill, and you're hiring people at an earlier stage, a cheaper cost, and you're helping them to see the next level of it through the process. Okay. So for me, I'm going, first, I need to have someone who has industry knowledge. If not, I can train them up a little bit and help them to understand how to connect with these people and tee them up for me, and I'll knock them down. Right. Then in that process of learning all about that, they're going to grow their knowledge about my product, about the customers, and I'll let them sit in on demos. And it's like, okay, now they can start demoing for me and helping close. I'm going to backfill them with another person that's early stage prospecting, and the engine starts getting built. Right. That way you as a leader still maintain a little control. You understand how to hold them accountable. And when you hire someone over that, you're like, here's the playbook. This is how you do it. Go run that and report back to me. These are the metrics I care about. You know it all. And now you can feel comfortable leaving it to the side. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk, let's move to the process side of it. And if anyone has questions just similar to that is in a tangent to this, feel free to ask anything that we're asking that might even be personal to what you're doing, because I want to make sure, like I said, you're getting everything you possibly can out of these sessions. Okay. So when I talk about process, whoa, there goes my marker. When I talk about process in sales, it is so important to have some structure associated to what you're doing, because kind of like that batting average, right? It doesn't always work every single time. And what you're trying to do is create a level of consistency that you can look back, measure what's working and what's not, learn and grow. Okay, if everything's chaotic every day and you're doing something different each week when you're doing outreach, it's hard to go, oh, that's working, that's not. I'm going to keep doing more of that. We have to do it consistently to get enough data to say that's successful, or what do I need to change? Okay, so process, very important on the sales side. So I'm going to talk about a couple of big processes that overlay sales. It's how do people buy? What's the typical process people go through to buy? And then how do we sell to those people in this environment? Okay, the two big processes. We'll start out with the buyer's process. Okay, this is how people go about buying in a B2B environment. Okay, if they have a problem, this is what they are doing. This is how they walk through it in their head and what they do through that process. Okay, I'll do a little funnel. We'll talk about it in stages. Right, that first stage of the buyer's process, we call that stage awareness. It's kind of funny because people that are in awareness are unaware, right? They're unaware of a solution that can solve their problem, or the problem is just not big enough or bad enough for them to solve. You know, they don't care. Status quo is our biggest competitor in this stage. They're kind of like, I'm happy with what I'm doing. You know, I'm fine. It's not causing too many problems for me right now. Okay. So there's a lot of people that are sitting up in this stage right now. There's been a lot of influx of new, different ways to look at education and what we can do to support it. And so there's a lot of new companies with a lot of great new ideas. And so there's going to be a ton of people sitting up in this, never heard of that before. I didn't know there was something that could solve that, right? And so as soon as the problem gets to a point where they go, you know what, I need to do something about this. I'm going to start talking to some people. I'm going to do some research. I need to learn whether or not I can fix this. They move into the next stage called consideration. Consideration. That's the Google stage. That's where they go out and research on Google. They talk to their friends. The EdTech space, there is no competition from school to school, really. So they're all talking to their friends. It's a very social environment, a social sale, where they're going, what are you doing, Fred? What are you doing for this? They're getting together at conferences. They're sharing ideas with each other. They're learning about how to solve their problems, right? But at this stage, they really haven't made a commitment to change. They're just investigating. As soon as that commitment comes into play and they're like, all right, by this time next year, we need to have this fixed. You know, they've got a goal, they're ready to make change, they put some budget towards it. That means they move into decision. Okay? They start making a decision. This is the time when our websites start lighting up with forms being completed, folks raising their hands saying, I'm interested, I want to talk to you, I want to see your product, right? Yes, Matt.
Hey, is the, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but is the sales cycle in EdTech longer? I mean, given the, the Board of Ed and other things like that, like, and is it seasonal? Meaning, like, hey, you've got to get this sale in before September or you're sunk.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of that, but it really, I hate to answer it with depends, but there's a lot of factors that go into the seasonality side of it and whether that affects you more. Are you selling to districts versus selling to schools? You're going to see more seasonality in the schools. Is your product very transactional? Are you selling to the classroom or to the principal or to the curriculum department? Or where are you focused? And that is going to play a big role in what it means to have a season or not, or whether or not the budget is like a curriculum, for example. There's a lot of seasonality to it because it's like, we're going to establish curriculum for once every 3 years. So I can't talk to you for another 2.5 years before we get back engaged in this, right? But if you're selling a transactional product that helps at the school or the classroom level, and a teacher can purchase that, it's like, bam, all the way through the year, except for the summer, you can be closing business.
All right, beautiful,
right?
thank you.
So there is dependency there. higher the price tag, bigger numbers associated to it. You're right. We're going to have to go through board approvals, and there's a system to that has to happen, and RFPs are working, and so it just there's a dependency on that stuff.
Got it. Thanks. Just trying to understand your, as we build this funnel out, right? That could be a consideration, right?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So this decision phase we were talking about, it's like, you know what? I need to, this is when they start saying, I've narrowed it down to my top 3 vendors. I need to look at their product and really understand it better, and make sure it's the right fit for me. Then we choose something. Okay. That when they choose something, that is when they move forward and they start to buy. Okay, this is very basic step, right? Just a foundational knowledge about how people go through a B2B purchase when they're using other people's money, right? Okay, and what happens in something like this too is that, well, let me ask this question. Do you think people buy based on logic, or do they buy based on emotion? What do you think is the biggest driver of a purchase?
Emotion.
Emotion.
Yeah. Emotion is the big deal. Emotions drive purchases. Logic is actually the rationale that happens after the decision. That's typically what's happening with buyers, right? And when we look at this stage that people are in, the further down the funnel they go, the more emotional they become. And so you as sellers, when you're doing your outreach and trying to connect with people on this, if you connect with them and they're in this stage, their emotions are going to be like, yeah, I guess, whatever. You know, they're going to be ho-hum, not a big deal. They're not going to be sharing a lot. They're going to feel closed and tight, right? And so you're going to be able to recognize that very easily, that I'm going to have to do a lot of work to move them through this process before they're going to buy. However, if you call somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a huge problem, we've been talking, and they just unload on you with emotion, whew, they're right here. They're closer down here. It's going to be easier. I'm going to be able to move this person faster and close them. Okay. So emotion plays a big role in the entire sales process. And every session, you're going to hear me talking about emotion. What do we do to uncover the emotion behind it? How do we use that and leverage that through the sales process to help them move through the process and close sooner? Okay. Emotion drives the sale. Okay. And I like to, in this phase, is to talk about the role of marketing and sales, because both those play a role through this entire process. Okay. So I like to show it like this, where this is the level of responsibility for the 2 teams in each one of the, in relation to the stage. This is the sales team. This is the marketing team. And the way that this looks, it's basically saying in the awareness stage, marketing has the majority of the responsibility to drive that level of awareness in our prospects. Okay. Anybody who might be a good lead for us, marketing is doing a lot of work in this stage, doing email campaigns, driving awareness, you know, trying to find the conferences that we need to go, doing webinars, doing lunch and learns, trying to figure out ways to get groups of people together to learn about what it is we do, right? That's a marketing function. However, sales plays a little bit of role. They can connect there. But the further someone goes down that funnel, the more it becomes sales responsibility to drive that. But marketing's still engaged a little bit. They're helping with sales decks and collateral materials and things of that nature, right? But sales really takes over, and when they're in buy, it's their full responsibility. Okay, make sense? Pretty basic. So do you guys know the difference between like the inbound sales or marketing process and the outbound sales process? 2 basic pieces of the puzzle, right? Inbound marketing and sales is when marketing takes the responsibility to drive people through this process, right? They do all of the work of generating awareness, helping people to understand the product. And the first time that a salesperson engages is at this level. This is inbound. This is when they filled out a form on the website and a sales rep responds and says, I can help you, right? But at this stage in the process, that your prospect has already gone through, who I need help. So let me research, let me talk to all my friends. I'm forming an opinion. I'm starting to determine what I really want, what's the best fit for me, and then I connect to you. Okay, in that stage, they may be learning from your competitors some things that they're not good for you and what you do. They may have formed their opinion about what they want, and it's not a perfect fit for what you offer, right? And so when you engage with them at this level, it is a little bit of a different conversation, because it's more of, you know what, I filled out this form, I'm going to get in touch with a salesperson. I have to deal with this person to manage through to buy this product. And so it's not necessarily as, the relationship still works, it's fine. And we do have to be doing inbound. There's a good balance between the two, but it can be a little bit combative. It can be more of, I know a lot about this already, just show me these 3 things and make sure that it's a good fit for me. People on the inbound process, the customer or the prospect is more in the driver's seat during that process. They feel more in control because they've done so much research, so much work, that they just need some answers from somebody. Okay? What we're going to attempt to do is talk about the difference or the balance that needs to occur in connecting at the outbound level and finding people up here. Okay? So in outbound sales, you have the opportunity to connect with these folks at that top level and generate awareness and create a completely different relationship. At this level, you almost can be like their trusted advisor, right? You're the one that's sitting going, did you know that there's something out there to solve your problem? And you're like, really? And you're starting to help them move through and learn about this stuff, right? So they start to build and form a little bit more of a relationship as they move through these buying processes. And to Matt's point too, that can happen in a couple of days. That can happen in 6 months, 18 months. There's a lot of dependencies on what it is you're selling and what it is what department they're in and who it's associated to and supporting and helping. So there could be a lot of steps in there or very, very few. The people that reach this stage in an inbound marketing process is probably somewhere between the numbers of 2 and 4% of the market are going to be like, yay, ready, do it on their own. There's a whole other high percentage that are still sitting up here that we have to do our work to try to get to. We're talking about 15 to 20% more that we can actually get out of the market if we do that extra energy and work. And these two functions play so well together because your marketing team is generating this message and pushing it out there, and they're trickling in here, right? And we're starting to learn what triggered them, what got them interested, what created a little bit of a spark in them to move forward with us. And we're feeding that back to the sales team and saying, use this message and try to get to these folks. Right? So they're both playing each other really, really well. Sales is feeding back a good message and starting to work together with them. Okay. Our outbound efforts are going to be very targeted and very specific, very focused. Our inbound efforts are going to be like this, right? What's going to be happening is in K12, like I said, it's a social sale, which means that when you get into certain regions, and let's say we closed a deal in Texas, in the Dallas area. Okay, we can talk to a lot of districts around there and reference, hey, we're talking to Richardson, we're talking to Plano, it's like that starts to spark engagement more because you're talking to similar folks in the same area, right? And so what's happening is your outbound efforts are going, who are the influencers that I really want to go after in which area? And we nail that down pretty hard, okay? And when we get one, marketing is like in that whole area. In the same sense, if you flip that around, you say, I don't know what territories I really need to go to. Marketing is going to do some blasts in different areas and see what uptick I start to get. And when something starts to bubble or boil in one area, we launch our sales team into that specific area. Our outbound efforts, not necessarily just our outbound efforts, get very targeted in that area where marketing said, guess what? People are interested in this area, right? And we attack. So again, coordinated efforts to work both sides of the table here in a good way. All right. And we can talk deeper about that. If anybody has questions about it, it will be coming up throughout the rest of the sessions, those different strategy points and different ways to engage folks with this. Okay. But basic level of understanding on the buyer's process. People move all the way through a funnel. There's this difference between inbound and outbound that we really do need to think about as we grow the company and move a little bit further down the path. Okay. Any questions about the buyer's process further? Okay.
I have one quick question. So you've emphasized that, process allows for measurability, being able to figure out kind of where you're going right and wrong. And in small startups like mine, sometimes marketing and sales and these things kind of crash into each other. How important is that clear distinction between marketing and sales in order to sort of follow a process? Or is it in order to prevent the messiness, right? Of just like who's doing what? I'm curious your thoughts on distinguishing marketing and sales as it's traditionally been done.
That's a great point. I mean, early stage, you're wearing all the hats, it is not about distinguishing roles for different people in it really early. It's really distinguishing activities and saying there is an activity that's aligned with driving inbound work and effort. And so an awareness activity versus an outbound, very connected activity. So I wouldn't worry too much very early stage in the process about labeling sales versus marketing. It's all like go-to-market efforts, right? I just want to get this out into the market. So I need to do a little awareness work, and then I need to target some specific folks. I need to start doing some outbound efforts and seeing what starts to work. I think when it starts becoming this distinguishable thing is when we're going, okay, now we need to establish groups for this. And I have so much on my plate as the leader right now. I have to start thinking about growing my sales org, growing my marketing team. And in that category, we don't have to jump right into hiring a marketing leader, hiring a sales leader. There's so many options in freelance and things like that to just take a little bit off as you grow your organization a little bit more, right? But to your point, distinguishing labels and really having clear cut things, that's not something you need to really worry about very early in the process. Let's just get the revenue starting to go and let's think about it as activities.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Matt.
Yeah, how much, or what do you see as the formula for inbound, outbound? Like, how much should we be focusing on, the website and that stuff versus, reaching out, buying lists, building marketing campaigns, etc.
You really like the depends questions. Oh, I hate.
Sorry.
I'm kidding. It really does. It really does depend. There's two different approaches that work really, really well in the K-12 space. It's that bottoms up approach or the top down approach. If you're working a top down approach, early stages, marketing's going to be pretty heavy, and it's going to start to tilt more to a sales feel. In that you're going to becoming more of a sales led organization. But marketing has to kind of, soften the beaches a little bit and help us understand where we're going to target a little bit better. If you're working more of a bottoms up approach, where you're trying to create teacher advocacy community and helping in that area, you're going to be a very heavy marketing organization where you're doing a lot of social connectivity and you're reaching out to the teachers and making them aware of it, and they're becoming your advocates to sell up, right? So it really does depend significantly on your product and who it's focused on and whom you're selling to, district versus school, in that area too. So it's always, in my book, it's always healthy to have a good balance between the two. You're just going to find yourself tilting a little bit one versus the other at what stage you're in it and whom you're selling to. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. If there's no other questions about the buyer's process, let's talk about the sales process, how it relates to the buyer's process, how we connect here. Okay. All right. I'm going to do this one in more of like a timeline. The sales process is very linear. Each step has to go in order. We cannot skip any steps. And so let's talk about this in almost like a timeline with a start and an end point. The beginning of the sales process really starts with prospecting. Okay. And you're going to label these all different things. We might have a mixture of different stages involved in our sales process with different labels. But in general, the terminology is not as important as the definition of what we do as we go through there. Okay, so prospecting to me is taking action on a list of qualified prospects, meaning best fit prospects for you. We're going to spend time here, and when we talk about defining targets, about saying, how do I get myself funneled down to focus on the right prospects that are going to be the best fit for me? Then prospecting is actually taking the action on it. It's not about researching. It's not about learning about them right away. It's about saying, I have defined a group of schools, school districts, targeted titles that are going to be the best fit for me. Now I need to start taking action on that. I need to do phone calls. I need to go visit their district. I need to go do things to get connected with them. Okay. So our job here is, how do I connect with them one-to-one and start talking to them and learning about whether or not my product is a good fit? As soon as they pick up the phone, connect with us face-to-face in any way, we move into what is considered more of a discovery process. Okay? Discovery. Now, discovery, again, in my book, is one of those things this is the stage in the sales process that is pretty much the most important thing to learn. If you get this right, the rest of the sales process becomes incredibly smooth and simple for you. Okay? Discovery, what we're doing here is we're learning. We're spending time understanding. This is the point at which we're uncovering needs, learning what process they're going through today, really getting a good knowledge of what's happening with them. If we kind of short circuit ourselves, if we do that very quickly and we don't learn everything that's going on, something's going to bite us in the butt that we didn't learn about later on down in the sales process, right? So if we gain a lot of knowledge, what's going to happen is everything after that is going to be very targeted on them. Not about what I want to do. That's going to come just because we're helping someone. We're supporting them. We're fixing the challenge that they really have. Okay. At this point, if we've determined fit, we've said mutually, we both feel like this is a good idea to take the next step. Really, the next step is to show them how we solve their problem. And so we call that the presentation stage. Some people call this demo, especially in the software space. We're demoing our product. Right? And in this stage, this is where your prospect actually sees the most value. It's your job as a salesperson to say, okay, I finally understand exactly what you need. These are the challenges you have. Now, let me show you exactly how we solve that problem. You're connecting the dots. Okay? It's so important that when we're presenting, that we're sharing with somebody, that it's not this cookie cutter presentation, that we're not bringing everybody through the same thing and just going, look what we got, look what we got, look what we got. No, this is for you. This is why I think this is the best fit for you. And we focus on them. Okay? Everything about these first few stages are not about us. It's about them and how we're helping them solve their problem. Okay? there's a lot of sales reps that I work with and a lot of companies that I work with. They're very product focused, very product centric. They built something. And so as they grow in this product and continue to build it, they start tilting so feature focused. They're like, what features do I need to build to help solve these problems? And so their messaging and their approach to them becomes very much about me. I've got this feature, I do this thing, my product does these things, as opposed to saying, we solve that problem of yours, we care about you, this is what I understand about you, and this is how you can solve it using this. Okay, that's what we're trying to do in this process. If you do this right, and they get to the end of this presentation, hopefully they're going, that's amazing. But the next thing that comes out of their mouth is like, how much does it cost, right? What is this? What do I need to invest, right? So we move to the proposal stage. It's all just about the money. Like, what are the terms? What's the proposal? We give them a more of a formal offer and say, this is exactly what it looks like. As soon as they get that, they go, all right, let's negotiate. Okay, early stage too, we can talk about this as well. This is a little piece of what I wanted to talk about, but it is when you're early in your development and your go-to-market stage, there is this opportunity to really create a early adopter program for folks. Okay, and that is done poorly in most cases because people are just trying to give it away and hoping that they get enough customers under them to get excited about it, that then they can start charging for it, right? And what's really important to understand is that free doesn't get a lot of pickup because free doesn't have any level of commitment. And if we can charge for our demos in some way, or I'm sorry, our pilots or our early adopter programs, if we can come up with a way to say, I am going to, instead of just giving you value and getting nothing in return, I'm going to trade value with you. And we talk about it that way as a program and say, my product, my service, my offer costs this much. However, you're going to pay this much, and I'm going to give you that value. But in return, you're going to give me this value. I'm going to be able to meet with you on a monthly basis. You're going to provide me data. You're going to do a testimonial. I'm going to have you are going to sign up for one webinar for you to talk about the results and what has happened with this. We need to get value to be able to sell into the market better from that client. And we trade. We don't give it away. We trade it, right? So we give them a big discount because they're giving us big value. Right, so that can be part of our negotiation here in the back end, and then at the end of it, we close the deal. We either won the deal, or we lost it. And what's really helpful as you move down this process and gain more opportunity, more sales are coming through, and now it's a team that you have to work with, or a couple of individual sales reps. Having this process in place is so helpful because based on the stage, you're going to start to understand the probability that someone will move forward and buy from you. Okay. So for example, like we could put a percentage, let me try 0%. I don't know, maybe like 2% of the people in this category are going to close within this time frame. Oh, we get to discovery, then let's move that to 10%. Oh, they got to demo. 25% of people from demo. They wanted a proposal, we're at 50%. They're in negotiation, we're at 75%. And we got our 100% here. So you as a leader, as opportunities start to develop and grow and you become, I'm looking at this huge funnel of things, you can start to put a little bit of sense to it by saying, the majority of my funnel is sitting way over in here. How do we move those up? And don't try to fool me that we're going to close all of that business in the next 30 days, right? It helps you as a leader start to go, I understand it. We're probably going to be somewhere more like this versus this, and address the issues a little bit better that way. Okay. As I said earlier, it's a very linear process. Things have to happen in order. Okay, each one of these steps is not another meeting. It can happen in, multiple things can happen in one conversation, right? So we can be prospecting, complete the discovery, and go into a little demo in one call, if it's a fast transactional sale. Sometimes we can be prospecting, set a meeting to do the discovery, set a meeting to then do the presentation, right? So it's step, step, step all the way through it, okay? When I was talking about the division of sales where we're saying we've got a SDR and we've got an AE, typically the function of the SDR falls in this category. Okay. The SDR is focused on prospecting and discovery. They didn't fit, they set a meeting and hand it over, right? Then the AE and it takes over this part. Right? They overlap a little on discovery because that SDR is only talking to one person. That's not the only person involved in this, in the buying process, right? So there's probably typically more people that'll come into that presentation meeting, and we have to make sure that we do a little discovery with those folks, know what their challenges are, make sure they're all aligned before we move through the rest of the sales process. Okay, is that all making sense to folks, right? We got that.
Yeah.
So if we decide, if our prospect, as we're going through this, wants to change the order of things, for example, one of the most common things that happens is when you're prospecting and you start moving to discovery, they go, oh, all right, hold on a second, how much is this going to cost? Right? You know what? You just skipped the presentation and went straight to proposal if you're telling them about the price. What that means is that they never saw full value in your product. Therefore, the likelihood of them saying, whoa, that's too much, I can't afford that, is much higher. Okay? And so we have to find ways to keep things in order and kind of push back a little bit when those type of things happen, so that we can get to the value conversation so they see it and price becomes less of a challenge for them because they realize what it's going to do for them. Okay? So that's why things need to really, really go in order. And just as a side note, the things that I'm talking about here and what I'm trying to teach is all about increasing your odds for success. It is not creating a silver bullet that every time you do things in exact order, everybody's going to buy from you. Hence the different percentages, right? It really is about saying, if you do these things the way that is prescribed here, you're going to see better odds of closing deals with a positive outcome. If you do things out of order, your close rate is going to go down and your ability to actually have wins is going to reduce significantly. Okay, doesn't mean you can't close deals, just means it's going to be harder. Yes, John.
Yeah, I have a question about that process. So somebody comes to my website. I had a few this morning. They fill out the quote request form. They've given me tons of specific information. I have everything I need to send them a quote. But obviously blasting them with a quote right away gives them the price and they can walk away from it. So they've given me all this information. They might be there with Esser and Cares. We've seen a lot of scrambling, there's a lot of scrambly people just like, I need a quote, and maybe they need it just for a competitive quote, or maybe they're actually interested and they got to move quickly. Is my goal to actually stall getting them the quote, to sort of follow the process as you're saying, and get that demo, get that call them up right away and find out, basically just get that 15, 20 minutes to show the value and sort of have the conversation, start the relationship, and then say, and then present the quote after that. That's my goal.
That would be the ideal scenario. I mean, there is opportunity, depending on what your product is, to have no touch sale process, right? Move all the way through, quote sent automatically, someone signs a PO, moves on, and everything's great. But in most cases, the ideal scenario is to be able to say, that's great information. Let's get on the phone, talk through this, make sure there's a really good fit here. And then let's show you what we have to work with so that we make sure that this is solving your challenges. and then we'll get the pricing and the quote out. You know, if people push back on that, there's opportunity to share ranges or share with them how you actually price things. I have people that call me all the time around consulting services or the work that we do, and they say, how much is this going to cost? And I say, well, the way we charge is X, Y, and Z. I never share pricing. I just talk about how we charge. And that's, oh, okay, cool, that works. And then we move on and continue the conversation, right? So there's ways based on what it is that you work with to try to avoid the pricing conversation early enough so that you can show value. There's also, like in your case, you might have this amazing product with all this detail on your website, video demos, all the things, and they're like, that is what I need. That's exactly solving my problem. And so there is a little bit of dependency there, okay? Just the more complex it is, and absolutely need to go through the discovery and the presentation stage of it.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions about that process?
Can you talk
Anything
perhaps
I can
about, excuse me, I had a question. Can you talk a little bit about what happens after the close won or close lost phase? So for example, for renewals or for like checking in with clients, if you know the timing wasn't right and the sale didn't go through, what would be the process or methodology around that?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing I think about when it's like, okay, we've closed a deal, we've won a deal. The big thing to think about is how are we implementing this thing? How are we going to make sure that from the moment I hand this off to the next step, that this customer is going to have an amazing experience, that they are going to use and adopt the service that I have? How am I going to judge the work that they're doing in there so that I can measure, is this a healthy client for me? Or do I need to do work to try to get them moving in a better direction? Because for me, early stage in my development of this product and my go-to-market strategy is to make sure, especially in K-12, that everybody that comes on board is going to turn into almost the advocate for me. They need to have the wow experience. They need to feel like this thing is amazing and it's working for them. And so I need to make sure that I have developed this idea or this understanding of what I'm doing to measure that and what I'm doing to roll it out effectively for them. Okay. And maybe to address a little bit of your after the fact, like renewals and things like that, there is a methodology in place for that. We need to be able to say, okay, within a certain window of time before the renewal, I have to do outreach and I have to make sure and focus in that area. There's a thought process to that as well. But again, that is a very dependent piece. I really love to be able to eventually put an automatic renewal on things and just it's auto renewing year after year. We're moving on. You know, early stage, it's hard. You know, we're new. We're trying to figure things out. We're trying to develop trust and some credentials a little bit. Eventually, we're going to be selling long-term contracts, locking people in, creating auto renewals and things of that nature. Does that answer your question at least?
It does, thanks.
Okay. I just think the most important part about the early stage is going, instead of just selling it, let's sell it and make sure they love it. You know, let's sell it and make sure that they're adopting it well, they love it, they're using it to the full extent so that they get the best experience and we start renewing. Because the renewal comes easier if we do that part of it. Okay. All right. If there's no more questions, we'll start moving into targets. All still very foundational stuff. Well, let's talk about targets. You know, in this space and in any small business, the challenge sometimes becomes the thought process of who we go after, because there's this thought of, if I have more people to go after, then I can make more money. And so I need to have the biggest market possible for me to go after. The challenge is that you cannot please every single group. You cannot make everybody happy. And so what we really need to start doing is kind of narrowing our focus down a little bit, and saying, who are the organizations that are going to be the best, fastest closes for me so I can start gaining traction in this area, okay? Start really growing my business faster. There are going to be people that you can help, but that sales cycle might take 2 years. And we want to, focus a little bit on those, but we want to see how we can go after the lowest hanging fruit they're going to buy immediately from us, right? Or at least as fast as humanly possible. Okay. And so the first thing we really look at is we need to define what is our ideal customer profile. What is our ideal customer profile, or our ICP? Okay. So the first thing we look at is we kind of look at type. What is the type of organization we are going to focus on? Who's going to need what we have to offer? Is that going to be schools, school districts? Do we go after charters? Do we go after public and private as well? Who are we really focused on? Okay. And so we try to narrow it down in that category. And then the next thing I look at is I look at size. Okay. I worked at a company a long while ago called NetChemia. In NetChemia they had a suite of products called the Talent Ed products. It was all focused in the HR department. And what we had to offer in recruiting and hiring teachers, that didn't affect somebody in a big way unless they had enough teachers to hire. So it didn't make sense that I was calling districts that had less than 1,000 or less than 1,500 students, because the number of teachers that was turning over and their need for a system in place was just like, whatever, not a big deal. There was not enough pain there, right? And then when I moved up to the top level, and it was like the top 10, 20 school districts out there, my product was not customized enough to fit their needs. Everybody wanted something different and some unique way of handling and routing all of these resumes that they were getting, right? So I eliminate that group, I eliminated this group, and I focus very tightly on the meaty middle of the K-12 market. Okay, so you got to start thinking about your product too in that area where we're saying, like, size is going to be really, really important for us here. We're also going to be looking at regional issues. Okay, region is probably one of the number one things that causes us to not be able to target certain areas. There's a company I'm working with right now that there's initiatives or laws in place right now that eliminate states as being targets for them, right? And so we've got to look into that side of it and say, who should we not be marketing to or going after in that area? The tighter we can make our focus, the tighter we can make our messaging. Okay, the more focus we can have on that messaging and be able to connect with people in a better way. Okay, Title I funds, if we're going after that, if we're looking for urban versus rural schools or school districts, it's a completely different field. Charter school districts buy like businesses, they don't buy like schools. So it's a different feel to it. Are we going after those folks as well? Do we need to look at that? Their needs are different, right? So this is an important exercise that you should do. And we created a worksheet and we help people kind of walk through understanding that feel and saying, okay, these are the ones I'm going to message this way. We usually try to fit either one or two ideal customer profiles to target. Okay, so this is at the company level or the organization level. What's the criteria associated to the business or the entity that I'm going to go after? And then the next level that we have to go to is we have to say, okay, now that I know that criteria, the next step is going to be the persona. Okay, who is the decision maker? Who are the different people that are going to be involved in the buying process that I need to be aware of, and be able to sell to? Okay, if I am selling to, let's say, if I'm selling to schools and the principal is going to be the one that I reach out to, who else in that organization is going to benefit from what it is I have to offer? Those folks are going to be we're either going to be talking about people who are decision makers or people who are influencers. Oops. All right, hold on. My spelling is horrible.
Instagram influencers, TikTok influencers, right?
Well, no, it's more of like.
Sorry, I was kidding.
But it is like if you're selling a tool that is used in the classroom, and it is more expensive than you would expect a teacher to purchase, then it's the principal who's purchasing it, it's the teacher who influences it. You know, we're working with a lot of SEL companies right now, and when it comes to SEL, that product can be influenced by counselors as well as teachers, but still needs to be purchased potentially at the principal level or the district level. Okay, and so you look at these folks differently because the decision maker cares about different things than an influencer would, right? We have to think about how we might message these people differently. And I would say this is probably one of the number one things you have to nail down before you do like mass outreach to these folks. We really have to be able to, as I was talking about very early in this, put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we're going after. We have to be able to say, I can relate to you. I understand the challenges that you're going through. I understand what's happening in your world. So there's an exercise that I would recommend going through to build out your persona. You can find a lot of different things online about persona templates or understanding personas, but it really is saying, what's the typical title of these folks? Yes, Matt, before I jump to
No. Finish your thought, and I'll chime in.
Longer thought. Yeah.
No,
It's
all right.
go. No.
So in EdTech, especially because I'm relatively new to the space, I'm trying to rationalize what. All right, we'll build the personas out. I have no problem doing that. And then where to reach them is sort of my question. Meaning, like, are they, is it conferences? Like, is email marketing going to work, or it sounds like it's more word of mouth, right? And like it's very segmented, right? So is there any, and maybe you'll get this in session 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, but like is it another it depends?
Yeah, it is a little bit of depends, but it is more of, we're going to get that in the next session actually, about the outreach approach and how to connect with these folks. But there's multiple ways to connect with everybody. Decision makers are very difficult. We'll talk about what it takes to connect with them in a cold outreach right now. But I mean, conferences are probably going to be one of the number one ways to connect with these folks. There's so many groups that support the education community, that put on group events, conferences that fall within specific categories, like a curriculum group or a HR group, and so those are great ways to really get connected and drive awareness about what it is you have. And then we can talk about things like webinars and lunch and learns and things of that nature.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. And when it comes to one of the places that you can investigate this a little bit more is that there's these groups called ESCs, IUs, they're education service centers. If you just education service center, put the state name, it'll say, okay, here's the education service centers of Texas, of Illinois, so if you're wanting to learn more about the resources available to you, or the groups or organizations, those places, those education service centers, or BOCES in the New York area, or intermediate IUs in the Pennsylvania area. Those are groups that actually can give you a lot of good information about how to connect with the different organizations and gain some knowledge and connect in those ways. Okay. So back to the persona side, it is just super important to be able to, like I said, put yourself in the shoes of the person you're going after, really learn, because what's going to come out of this research and work is all going to be how you message effectively, how you connect and communicate to folks. Okay. But one thing I want to point out is that let's talk about what it looks like to do cold outreach in a very basic way in the K-12 space. All right. There's this thing that we do that we, or just a little background history for a little bit. One of the things we do here at Fuel Sales is I was consulting for a couple of years, working down this path, helping people grow. And what happened was the growth started to happen, and I was, okay, now we got to grow, we got to hire people. And the hardest person to hire is that SDR, that early stage person, because the experience level is low. We don't know if it's going to work out. We see a lot of churn in that category. And so over a couple of years, I decided instead of trying to find those people, we were going to build them. And I created a curriculum back in 2018. And now we have a training program for people that are interested in getting into EdTech sales. And so that part of our business has grown significantly. We have right now 53 people that about 80% of them are former educators that are making phone calls out of our organization and helping companies like yourself generate leads. Okay, so the knowledge we have about the cold outreach process is fueled by a bunch of people every day doing this job. Okay, and so we get a good sense of what works, what doesn't, what the process really is. And so what I wanted to share with you is one of the things we've developed over the years as the best way to get in touch with a decision maker. They're really hard to get connected to. Okay, when you do outreach, there's a lot of people that say, well, cold calling doesn't work anymore. You know, I can't get a hold of decision makers. I reach out to them, I email them, I do all this stuff, and nobody ever talks to me. I can't get a hold of decision makers. So I don't know how to do cold outreach anymore. We have to get referrals. I got to go to conferences, but it works. And I want to share with you a little secret, a little idea on how to do some of that stuff. Okay. We always, when we're doing school level sales, district level sales, we always work the top down approach. So our initial outreach is always going to be the decision maker, but like I said, it's very hard to get a hold of them. The huge benefit that you have in K-12 though, is if you get a hold of any human working in the department that your decision maker works in, they're going to know something. They're going to be incredibly helpful. Okay. And so what we try to do is we say, hey, is Susan available? No, Susan's not available. Then, well, you know what? Maybe you can help me. And we move that down here and we say, we need to try to create what we call a coach. And we treat this gatekeeper or person who's blocking us to the decision maker as the decision maker. We say, maybe you can help me. Let me share a little bit about why I'm calling. Then you can tell me whether it makes sense to keep reaching out to Susan. And then as we learn about the problems that they have, they start opening up to us. And they start sharing with us all about what's going on in their organization and the problems that they have related to what we have to offer. Okay. And we're like, oh, this is really great information. It's helping me to better communicate to the decision maker. They're telling me when they're going to be available and what problems they're really having, all this stuff. So they're coaching me on how to sell. But the ideal scenario is to try to convert that coach to champion. What happens during that conversation is that coach starts to go get curious and go, like, tell me a little bit more about what you're offering. Tell me a little bit more about your product. Help me understand how it's going to help us. And they're like, man, that could be really amazing. We really need that. Let me help you get a hold of the decision makers so they can see this, right? And so that's what we're doing. We call it triangulating. And we're saying, you know, there's so many markets out there where you get a hold of the gatekeeper and they just say, sorry, I can't help you, bam, and they hang up the phone and there's no help. And just a dead end everywhere. But in K-12, it's very unique. It's very different. If I call curriculum, if there is another human just sitting at a desk in curriculum beside the decision maker, I'm going to learn a lot. They're going to tell me a lot of information about it. And if I just get a little bit more information, my voicemail back to this decision maker is going to be much more personalized. Okay. And I'm going to take a small tangent about the difference between segmentation and personalization. Okay. There is a big difference in that. And some people put it all together. Okay. And use it as interchangeable words. As you market and do outreach to people, personalization is going to be the ultimate goal of being able to really focus at an individual level on their needs and what their challenges are. However, if you try to personalize every communication that you do, you're going to have a problem with speed and efficiency, right? You're going to have to do so much research and so much work that you're never going to be able to get the messages out you need to grow your business at the speed you need. So my focus really is around segmenting and putting individuals into groups and saying, these groups in this area with this size typically have these challenges. I will message this way, with the goal of when I get a hold of anybody, I'm going to take that segmentation and turn it into personalization and be more connected. Okay, so don't get hung up too much on trying to personalize everything you do. Start with segmentation, put them in buckets, and know that you're going to get a little bit more personal as you go down. Okay, so what's happening in this is I do outreach, I get a hold of a human, they give me some insight. Worst case scenario, I have a more personal ability to connect here. Best case scenario is I turn them into a champion and they make the connection for me. I don't know how many times a day I've heard that a stakeholder or an influencer created an intro email to the decision maker for one of our SDRs and said, you've got to talk to this person. Okay, it's a unique phenomenon and it works really, really well. So this is part of the process of saying I need to understand who I'm going after as far as the organization, really tighten it down so that I can message effectively. And then I move into personas and figure out who is most impacted by what we have to offer as the decision maker, and who are the people that are underneath it that I might have to message a little bit differently. Okay. And the thing that I see is one of the biggest challenges with organizations messaging in this area is what I was talking about earlier. They talk a lot about themselves and about features and say, look what I can do, versus I understand you. And when we talk about that in that way, we are talking about issues. Okay? Issues are what hooks people or get people engaged in having a conversation with you. The folks that get annoyed with salespeople is when the salesperson calls and pitches their product right off the bat and acts like they know the person on the other end of the phone. Okay? They call, and I've heard this terminology before. It is not my terminology, but I've heard it. It made me laugh, so I'll use it. They call that pitch slapping. You just jump on the phone and you pitch them right away over the face. It's just like attack, right? And we don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to say, I don't know you, but I've been talking to a lot of other people. And what they've been sharing with me is that they're struggling with this, they're frustrated here, or they're concerned with. Is that anything that you can relate to? Are you dealing with any of that? And if they say yes, that's our opportunity to go into a discovery and really learn about how big and how bad that problem is, and are they ready for change, right? But if we go into the problem saying, hey, I'm calling you because you look like a lot of people that have problems, it's like, whoa, wait a second, I don't have a problem. Don't tell me I have a problem. It's like, I know your neighbors do, and that's how we start the conversation with them. Does that make sense for folks? Yes, Carl.
Thanks. I have a question about exactly that. I'm curious about sort of the balance of pre-discovery, of essentially, like coming in with a little bit in your cold outreach of, I know that the state legislature just passed this act, blah, 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 that is impacting schools and, you know, creating these new problems, that kind of thing. Like, how much do you show that you've done your homework? And where's the balance of like, when that becomes kind of creepy or overly aggressive?
It becomes more creepy when you start talking about them individually. Making it sound like, I've never talked to you before, but I know that you suck at this and you're bad in this area. It's like, don't do that to me. It's more of saying, I know overall that there's been these things that have been passed that made it harder for folks to do that. How are you trying to overcome that today? What are you doing? And it's like, I want to learn from you instead of sell you. You know, and I'm not going to engage in teaching you about me or pushing me on you until I know you. And so that's kind of, you can come to, it's great to come to the table with some knowledge around market and a little bit of knowledge around their school district and what you've heard. Matter of fact, you can even, some of the better ways to do this is when you do talk to that influencer, this coach, your message can be like, I was just talking to Janet and she was sharing with me. I learned it from you. I learned it from your people. And so it's like, oh, they know a little bit more. Okay, I'll talk to them. Okay, so that's good. If they have things online, which most of them do, they have their plan for the year and their annual report and the details that you can pull off. If it's public knowledge, then it's probably pretty okay to start sharing some of that stuff with them. But if it makes them feel bad, if it makes them sound like they don't know what they're doing, it is a problem to talk about it. You want that type of knowledge or that type of information to come out of their mouth. Okay. So that's how you want to approach it.
Thank you.
Is that helpful? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I do want to get into messaging. We've got about 30 minutes left, I think, right? Is that right, Amy? We've got 30 minutes left about?
Yes.
Okay, good.
34.
I want to get into messaging a little bit and talk about how do we take the information we really know about these personas and influencers and turn it into a way to communicate and engage with folks. Okay, so let's get this off the board. What I was sharing with you guys is that it's not about us. Communicating about us and our product and the features and all the things we do is not what people care about. They're not going to engage with you because you're this hot new thing. They're going to engage with you because you're solving their problem and that they can relate to the issues that you're sharing with them. Okay, so when we develop this persona and we really understand the uniqueness about the titles that we're going after and the challenge in their everyday life that relates to what we offer, it's going to make it so much easier to then say, here are the challenges that other people like you share with me. Do you relate to that? Okay, so the first thing when I work with companies, I build out this thing called the messaging framework. We use it as our hub for building scripts and emails and things on our website, but it's a very basic one-page document that it starts with the part of the company that we talk about. We say, define the current state. I'm just going to give you the roadmap to our messaging framework so you can start to do some of this on your own. What we say is, please tell me about what's going on in the current state. And the way to best explain this and what we need in that category, you can unload paragraphs of information in here, but it's really about saying, why did you build what you built? What did you see going on in the market? What did you see happening? How are people living without what you have to offer? How are they going about their day-to-day? Right? So that, that made you go, man, I think I need to do something about this and fix it. Okay, so you kind of describe that. And just as context, this document is almost like an onboarding document for early stage people that come into your company, that you're starting to give them a sense of, this is why we bought, this is why we created this thing, this is what we saw happening in the world, and you're giving them a really strong foundation of knowledge to move forward in, and so they know how this conversation is going to go. When you call a person, the persona, let's call them like the director of curriculum, I know what their day in the life of looks like. I understand the problems that they go through. So that conversation to me, I know what's coming at me, and I know how to navigate the water a little bit more there, right? So that's really what current state's about. Talk in detail about the why a little bit. What's happening in the world that made you do what you did? Okay. Then the next thing we do is, out of this, what are the issues? What are the main issues that persona is dealing with? And the way that we talk about issues has to be emotional. This is critical. Okay. So when you do issues, I want to see your top 5 issues, and the issue statement has to start with an emotional word. So for example, this persona is struggling. This persona is concerned. This persona is frustrated. They're tired of. Okay. So I'm working with a company right now that focuses on social emotional learning. And one of the easy conversations to have, or the easy ways to think about this, is that they talk about people being frustrated with the students that they aren't able to identify. They're worried about kids falling through the cracks and not getting the support that they need. So that's one way to talk about an issue, is by saying, I hear that people in this area, like, that's a bad way to say it. Rewind. I've been reaching out to student leaders in the state of Kansas, and I've specifically been talking about how they're managing and monitoring their social emotional wellness of their students. It's a big topic today. And what they've been sharing with me is that they've been really concerned about, are they touching everybody? They're worried about those students that are falling through the cracks and not getting the support that they need. Is that something you guys are dealing with? Is that something you can relate to? Like, oh yeah, you know what? That is a problem for us. And we start into a conversation. Okay. So what we're not doing is saying, hi, my name's Dan O'Reilly and I work for this company, and what we offer is, and how we help districts is, and they're like, yeah, I get it. I'm busy right now. Everybody's trying to do something in social emotion. Great. Why don't you send me some information? I'll get back to you. Never. Okay. But if we're saying, hey, I'm trying to learn, are you like these? Are you similar to what I've been hearing out there? Talk to me. We can have a good conversation with somebody. Are you guys getting that piece of it? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And so instead of focusing on product and focusing on features and talking about benefits, what we do is we say, what are the issues? How do I create an emotion behind what it is that's going on? How do I trigger somebody to engage with me? Okay. Once we understand the issues and we've got those documented, then we move to what our offer is. It's all about now talking about the solution. This should not be fluffy and all these extra words, and it should be very direct and to the point. This is how I solve the problem. This is what we offer to solve the problem. Should be basic. Everybody should understand that very, very well. I've been talking about that for a long time, I'm sure. Now, once we talk about the solution, the last thing on the list is it's really our opportunity to brag a little bit. And we're saying, this is why we consider what we have to offer one of the best solutions for this right now. Okay. And so in this category, we talk about why are we the best? And we do small little paragraphs, nuggets of information that all relate back to these issues. Okay. When they're concerned about this, this is why we're the best to solve that. When they're frustrated, This is why we're the best to solve that. When they're tired of this, this is why they're the best to solve that. Does that make sense? All of what we're going to be doing here is going to lead to all the other sessions that we're going to be talking about, okay? So when we talk about the discovery process, we're going to talk about what components of this do we use and when do we use those. When we talk about our outreach cadence, we're going to be saying, here's how you take out pieces of this and turn it into your email marketing campaign that goes along with it. When we talk about, even the front end of the outreach, we're going to be talking about scripting and how to build your scripting based off of this one sheet. Okay. So this is, I think this is kind of going to be the heart of how you message. Tell me about the world. Tell me about how you guys, why you built what you built, what are the challenges going on. Now let's talk about those specific issues to the persona in a very emotional way, because we know emotion is what sells people and gets people engaged. Then how are we solving it? And what makes us the best? Okay. Any thoughts or questions about any of that stuff? All good? Okay. Wow. Any questions about anything else?
You're doing such a great job, Dan. You're doing such a great job.
Dan, I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question actually about this. This makes sense, and I've heard of this before, this kind of messaging document. And that, you have an email campaign that kind of maybe pulls certain elements of those issues out. You have brochures, you have whatever. On a web page itself, and maybe you'll talk about this in a future session, right? A landing page for schools that says, here's your, here are these issues, here's my solution, and brag a little. Is there a particular hierarchy that you find that works well in kind of presenting that message? Are you starting with the bragging at the top? You're starting with the issue right at the top and kind of imagining someone scrolling down to the solution? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been two really effective ways that I've seen this work. The more complex the issue, I feel like the problem statements or the issue statements are front and center. They're like, wow, that's me. I feel that. Let me read and dive into this a little bit more. There's other ways to put the solution right at the top. This is who we are. This is what we do. And let me tell you why we do that, because this is what we saw and these are the challenges. And, so depends about, I think that for me, if I just think about it a little bit more, the reason behind some of that is almost due to maturity of the market in that area. If the market is really less mature about the product offering, and you're more in this education sale process, then the problem statement at the top is huge.
Right. Okay.
You're addressing that. But when the market becomes a little bit more mature, the web page needs to be much more focused on the SEO side of things and really showing that is the product that you offer. This is the thing you're in. So that starts to become more front and center is the solution. So, I mean, that to me is just one way to look at it. It doesn't mean it's the only way to look at it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a quick follow-up, is there any, are there any other trends on contacting? Initially we talked about conferences, right? But maybe if you're outside the public school realm, are you seeing more success with social, right? With email marketing, with, like video marketing, like BombBomb or other things like that?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to kind of prioritize, the number one lead I'd want to look at is a referral. Somebody saying you need to talk to them, and so I do a lot of work in every sale to make sure that I can get referrals from people. Even before I've closed business, I'm trying to find ways to talk to them about other people who are struggling with the same problem. And can you introduce me? And, when I go to conferences, I'm going up to my clients and saying, I'm trying to get a hold of these 3 people. Go find them and bring them in. Do you know these people? Bring them over here and tell them how great I am. So I want referrals as much as I possibly can, because those are the easiest sales. So I try to incorporate ways in my process to get referrals most often, right? And so
Yes.
then for me, the next level is going to be that face-to-face interaction with people that I get. And so in the K-12 space, like I said before, tons of conferences, tons of way to engage with people in that way. Just make sure that the specific buyer that attends those conferences are going to be your buyer, right? And those are the people that are going to be there. So if I can interact face-to-face, show personality, and connect with them in that way, that's going to be really helpful to me, and get me more opportunity in that way. Everything else starts to take second, just starts to fall into a similar category of outreach, right? Where every one of those has their unique role in it, whether we're doing some kind of group webinar and driving awareness, or we're enlisting a client and saying, can you do a little lunch and learn in your area and talk about your experience from us and what happened with it? Those type of activities are the group one-to-many approaches that help a lot to drive awareness and bring leads in your way. And then more of the one-to-one approaches, the best for me has always been the combination of email and phone and social all in one campaign, where we mix and match a little bit of that stuff. And that's actually the next session. We're going to be talking about what a typical outreach cadence looks like, how to message effectively in there, what the emails look like when you go through that, how to do that the most effective way to get the best results.
Awesome.
We've got plenty of times. If anybody's interested, I have a topic that's not part of any of the other ones where we can talk about conferences.
Great.
So, and back to what Matt was talking about, the best lead sources. When you go to a conference, it's you're shelling out some money to go to this conference and sit down with people. And if you don't really plan this thing well, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. Okay. You can't just say, I'm going to get a booth, run out there, throw a tablecloth on there, put some candy in a bowl and be like, all right, people are coming to me. Right. We have to actually plan the engagement a little bit more. And so when it comes to conferences, the thing that people tend to not do initially is really promote the fact that they're going to be there and do outreach to people saying, let's meet there, right? So the pre-work is really important to say, if you're going to be there, let's just meet there. If you're going to be there, let's just meet there. I'd like to meet you at this conference. And I'm calling my clients that I have, and I'm saying, hey, if you know anybody that's going to be there, let them know about me. Any way we can find a way to connect with them, I'd like to do that, right? And so that pre-work on the front end is really important to try to make sure you get enough traffic. If you are going to get a booth, you also can go to conferences and just say, I'm not getting a booth. I'm not going to spend the money on the booth, but I am going to spend the money to be in a place where all my prospects are mingling. All right. So that pre-work becomes so much more important. There's a conference called ASU GSV out in San Diego every year. Big conference. And I have gone multiple times to that conference where I just hang out in the lobby or hang out in the bar that's on the side. And I have set meetings with people that are there. And they're just funneling out of the expo, coming and meeting with me at the bar or at the lobby, and we're talking through things. That's an opportunity for you as well. You don't have to get a booth and go, do all the sessions and everything else. You can just sit and engage with people there. If they have a badge on them, you can go talk to them. So that's one way to approach it. The other thing that needs to happen too, if you decide to invest in a booth, do not just walk into that booth, sit in your chair behind the booth and wait for people to come up and ask you about your product. Okay. You have to engage the masses that are there, right? You have to get them interested in coming into the booth. All the material you put up in the big banners and the TV, all the stuff that you put up, you can't count on all of that to be what's going to drive people into your booth. Okay. My recommendation is that you sit down with your team and you talk about, what are we going to say to people as they walk by the booth to get them engaged in us? Can I ask them a quick question? Can I engage them in something that doesn't relate completely, but it'll get them talking to us? How do I stop them from being nice, and not really stopping at my booth? You know, the big, huge candy bar might be helpful. However, it's not the only thing that's going to stop them to come by the booth. So you have to come up with your, how am I going to stop them? The other thing is, it's easier to stop people if you're not behind the booth, but in front of the booth. Okay. So instead of standing behind it and in behind all of your stuff in front of it, get out in front of the booth, come around it, engage them in the traffic that they're walking through, right? Connect with them, pull them in, tell them about things. Okay. One of the things I want to do is go on. Just as a side note, I've gone to all these conferences, and you'd be surprised at how many people, and the bigger the company gets, the worse that they are at this, is that they spend all this money setting up this booth, and then the people that they send to the booth are just like, they're not doing anything to drive leads. They're not talking. I stood in front of a booth for 3 minutes waiting for someone to actually look at me, to talk to me, and nobody did. I was pulling their brochures. I was looking at it, looking back at them, like, and I'm stepping away, and nobody engaged me. You know what I want to do is don't anybody steal this, but I want to do like the secret shopper approach for booths. I'm going to be a secret shopper. I'm going to, work with these conferences, and I'm just going to create a little, like, I'm going to go up to your booth 3 times. I'm going to visit them, and I'm going to score your people. Like, oh my God. So got to get better at this stuff. Matt, yes.
That's great. That's great advice for sure. I've worked the floor and literally experienced exactly what you just said. What can you say in the last, 2 years, COVID pandemic, like what has changed with the maybe, K through 12 hybrid digital, like what are, like, if you had to summarize that in maybe 3 steps, versus 5 years ago, getting leads, engaging these people, are there any major trends that you're like, okay, don't do this, or now everyone's worried about this? I mean, I know we have a lot of, vitamins to give, right? There's so many things to focus on: engagement, time for your most needful students, curriculum, those things. Like what are you coming out of, maybe we're all going back in person, or maybe there's still some risk out there. What do you see as those is kind of your top 3 learnings from that?
One of the things, one of the big things that I saw changing over the years, IT was almost like, in the past has always been like the network admin person. That's it, really. Just kind of a support person in the background. Wasn't really as engaged in the buying process, other than sometimes they would bless things, but they didn't engage at the beginning. And what I've seen shifting over the last couple of years is that IT is starting to be put more in the front, and the groups like the HR and curriculum and everything else, they're falling back and letting in saying, IT, you need to solve this problem. Stop putting this on me to fix all these things that are happening because of COVID. You fix it, because it stretches across more departments. And it's caused more problems across the whole organization. And so IT is starting to become much more involved, and they're promoting people into roles that are just like, you got to fix this. That's your responsibility if we don't do something about it. And so instead of not even addressing IT anymore, I mean, it is now they're becoming a bigger part of the sales process, and eventually becoming the front end of the sales process in some of it. And so while you may be doing outreach and your main decision maker is truly always going to be in those individual departments, IT is going to be more connected and engaged in the conversation earlier as part of it, and might be somebody that you get pushed to initially to deal with. So that's been one big thing. The seasonality has blown up a bit too. Each year has looked different than the past years before, because money has been much more available, and they're confused about how to spend it, where to spend it, what to do with it. So kind of the initial thing that happened was like this frenzy of like panic purchasing. They just went nuts and went, oh my God, I got to solve it. Throwing buy. And teachers were buying things and administrators were buying things, and they got cluttered with all of this technology, right? And we're moving to the other end of the spectrum now, where it's like, all right, we got to clean this mess up. Is this even working for us? How do we measure this? We got to remove some of these things and really be prescriptive about what we're doing with our technology in the classroom and the technology that supports our decision making. And so that has been another big conversation, another kind of way things have been moving. Is that
Any movement on, are you seeing any difference on budget or on ability to spend?
Yeah, I mean, budget has been more available because of the fact that the money is coming from different places and being allocated to say, here's a big pool of funds. And so some of the things that are happening with organizations right now that are vendors into the K-12 space is that instead of selling one-year deals and being happy with the one-year deal, they're saying, why don't you pay up front for 3 years? Why don't you pay up front for 4 or 5 years? Let's use some of that money now that you have in this huge bucket that might go away soon, so that your budget can be freed up for the next couple of years to spend in other areas. Let's just get this solidified for the next 4 or 5 years, 3 years. So this conversation has kind of changed to long-term contracts and upfront payments and doing things in that nature. So that I think that's been a huge help in saying, let me help you understand how to spend that money with me. So.
Awesome, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I've got to the end of the content that I had and even more. So like, if there's no more questions, if you're good, I don't know, I'm good.
Just one more quick question, Dan. This has been so amazing, so helpful to me. Thank you. This is totally random question is we're hiring a new director of sales, a new salesperson at our company. I'm just interested about the optics of, like, you don't say at the bottom of the email or on the business card, salesperson, right? I've heard you use this language, account executive. People use director of partnerships. Could you talk a little bit about the lingo of like a salesperson without using the name salesperson?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's back to that first question I asked you guys when we started this. It's like, what comes to mind when you say salesperson? It's like, salesperson bad. So yes, I think a lot of people work towards trying to create a title that doesn't sound like sales, even though they're in sales. And so some of the common ones you've already mentioned, like partnership manager, business development associate, account executive, things of that nature, to try to avoid using the word sales. For me, everybody knows that stuff already. It's not that big of a deal. I'm not too terribly worried about titles and things. The person at the highest level, they know this person is leading a sales organization. Let's not try to fool everybody. So if you're hiring a sales director, they are the director of sales. That's probably my personal opinion on it, is not worrying too much at the highest levels. At the lower levels, it's okay. Play around with the titles a little bit more. A partnership manager is equivalent to like a sales rep, an individual contributor trying to close business.
Great, thank you.
Mhm. And John, how big is your sales org right now to hire the director? How many people do you have on the sales team?
Actually, this is our first external hire. We have 11 full-time employees. We have this sort of director level that this person's coming in at in terms of the, so it's actually it's not finalized yet. So it's kind of like figuring out the title that makes sense for this person. So in a sense, I'm hiring an executive and looking for the right kind of name.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the mistakes I see people make is something I kind of touched on a little bit, is that the first hire they make is someone with a more strategic title that comes in with experience. And so if you think about the head of the person with experience, think about how someone walks through the sales career. The first job they get in is they're in the trenches and they're executing. And they're executing. It's like, I gotta put in the effort to get the reward. And then they promote and they get to an account executive. Less executing, more closing, more strategy, more relationship. And they're like, I like this. And then they move to the next level. No prospecting, just hanging out, relationships. They've developed such a connection in the market that there's a lot of referrals and the name is out there a little bit more. And then we hire them as our first sales hire. And they say, I've got 8 years of sales experience in the EdTech space. I'm bringing a Rolodex. I'm bringing everything with me. But they have sold with a company name that has recognition. They have systems. They have processes. They have support people making a bunch of phone calls for them, teeing up leads. They've got their website in order. Everything's humming. And that's what they're used to.
Right.
Okay. Then they come on board with you and you go get it. And they're like, where's all the support? Where's all the people calling for me? I got to pick up the phone. There's no way I'm picking up the phone again. And so they spend a year goofing around trying to make this thing work. And you're going, are you doing the right job? And they're like, sure. It's a really hard, it's a hard thing. And you waste a year's worth of time and energy into it. So you have to be really careful about making sure they really understand and are prepared and ready to be the executor and not the guy come in or the girl come in and saying, here's the strategy. And just talking about unique ways we can go to market with this, and they're all talk and no action. Okay, so just be cautious of that as you go forward with the hire, that you really are vetting the person to make sure that they realize, I might be giving you a director title, but you got to realize what you're walking into. You don't have any of the things that you have today here. You need to make those, you need to build those, and you need to be a part of the execution. So you need to be ready to do that. And if you're not, this is not a good fit for you.
Great. That's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, Daniel, I love the two triangles you wrote earlier, an hour ago, right? Where the marketing, it was bigger at the top, right? And the sales got bigger at the bottom, right? Just a beautiful execution, right? Because that chief revenue officer or that account exec, right? Like you have to have those things in place, right? Before, those tools have to be there. Like you have to have the marketing message. You have to have the drip campaigns. You have to be able to understand your segments, understand your ICP, like fundamental, right? Before you can, throw a Ferrari at it. Right.
Right. You have to have your playbook really built out that says, this is how we're going to market, and this is what we know works and what doesn't work. And I've got the whole guide, and you hire it and you hand it to them and say, there you go get it. But if you say, come on in, figure this stuff out, I'll be over here if you need anything. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. So yeah. All right, everyone. I hope this was helpful. I'll be back again. I think it is next week. We'll be hitting session number 2. We'll be talking through all the stuff that comes after we laid the foundation. Now let's go start executing. How do we do outreach to the people that are on our list? What happens when someone picks up the phone and says, hello, what do we say? How do we talk to them? If they show interest, how do we really go through the discovery and see if it's worth our time to do a presentation? And then we'll dive into the sales presentation best practices. Okay?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dan.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Daniel.
I'll be
Thank you,
posted
everyone.
online
Very
hopefully
much.
before the end of the week, everyone. Thanks for coming. See y'all next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.